The world stood still when the shocking news broke. Pope Francis was gone. The headlines spread like wildfire, and everyone, no matter their faith or background, was glued to their screens, trying to understand what was happening. It wasn't just a change of leadership. It was an event that set the entire world on edge. For a church that spans centuries of tradition, the sudden disappearance of the Pope was not just a moment of uncertainty, but also a moment of hope. And what followed was something no one could have predicted: the rise of a new leader, a figure who would change the course of history forever. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle of Manila. When the papacy was left vacant, people wondered what would happen next. Who would step into the shoes of one of the world's most influential figures? The Vatican was now in a state of anticipation. The College of Cardinals, the highest body responsible for choosing the new pope, was suddenly the center of global attention. The conclave, which is known for its secrecy and sacred rituals, became a stage for what would turn out to be an unexpected outcome. There were whispers of potential candidates, of names being passed around behind the Vatican's closed doors, but no one could have anticipated what would unfold. The name that emerged was one that had been quietly building momentum in the background: Luis Antonio Tagle. Known for his warm smile, his gentle demeanor, and his deep compassion for those in need, Tagle was not the obvious choice. He wasn't from one of the traditional European powerhouses of the Church, but that didn't matter. Tagle's connection to the people, his humility, and his heart for the marginalized made him stand out in a way no one had expected. As the conclave continued, the air was thick with tension. The cardinals from around the world were faced with a decision that would shape not just the future of the Catholic Church, but the future of faith across the globe. They needed a leader who could bridge the old and the new, someone who could guide the Church through a rapidly changing world, someone who understood the complexities of the 21st century. And as the days went by, the murmurs about Tagle grew louder. His name was now being seriously considered. Luis Antonio Tagle was born in the Philippines, a country far from the Vatican's marble halls. He grew up in a family of modest means, but his parents instilled in him a deep faith and a strong sense of social justice. From an early age, Tagle saw the struggles of the poor and the marginalized. His experiences shaped his worldview, and they would eventually lead him to one of the most powerful positions in the world. After completing his theological studies, Tagle became a parish priest in his homeland, dedicating his life to serving the people. It was in these humble settings that his reputation for empathy, intellect, and deep spirituality began to spread. The Vatican, a global institution with over 1 billion members, was at a crossroads. It was facing unprecedented challenges. Poverty, war, climate change, and secularization were all affecting not just society, but also the Church. The faithful, scattered across continents and cultures, were looking for guidance. They needed a leader who could speak to their hearts, someone who could understand the complexities of the modern world while staying true to the Church's age-old traditions. And in Pope Tagle, they saw a man who could bring this balance. As the cardinals gathered in the Sistine Chapel to make their decision, the world watched in anticipation. The history of the papacy had been defined by leaders who were often conservative, coming from strong traditional backgrounds. But now, something different was on the horizon. Tagle's name was being considered more seriously, and the more the cardinals thought about it, the more they saw in him the qualities they needed. On the outside, the faithful stood in St. Peter's Square, praying and hoping. The wait was long, the tension palpable. The bells of the Vatican had been silent for too long, and the faithful were yearning for a sign. Then the moment arrived. The white smoke rose from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel, signaling that a new pope had been chosen. The crowd erupted in joy, and the world held its breath as they waited to see who would step out on the balcony. And then he appeared. The first Asian pope in modern history, Luis Antonio Tagle, stood before the world, and the atmosphere in St. Peter's Square was electric. Tears of joy filled the eyes of those who had gathered to witness this historic moment. For many, this wasn't just the election of a new pope. It was the beginning of something extraordinary. Pope Tagle's presence symbolized a new chapter in the Church's history, one that was filled with hope, renewal, and compassion. Pope Tagle's first appearance on the balcony was a moment of pure emotion. His smile, his humble gesture, and his simple yet profound presence won the hearts of millions. For the first time in a long while, the Catholic Church seemed ready to evolve. Pope Tagle was not a traditionalist in the strictest sense. His focus was on people, on the poor, the marginalized, and the downtrodden. He wasn't just a spiritual leader. He was a man who lived out the teachings of the Church in his daily life. For many, this was the beginning of a new era in the Catholic Church. The Vatican, long seen as a bastion of tradition, was now embracing change. Pope Tagle's leadership promised a church that would be more inclusive, more compassionate, and more in touch with the realities of the world. His rise to the papacy was seen as a sign that the Church was ready to move forward, to take bold steps in addressing the issues that the world was facing. His leadership, however, was not without challenges. The Catholic Church had long been divided on key issues, and Pope Tagle would have to navigate these divisions carefully. Doctrinal differences, the role of women in the Church and the clergy, sexual abuse scandals were just a few of the many issues that, some of its most pressing issues, including poverty, war, climate change, and the ever-increasing secularization of the world. The challenges were immense, but the Church was now looking for a leader who could bridge the old with the new, someone who could lead with wisdom, compassion, and clarity. And, behind the closed doors of the Sistine Chapel, a process had been unfolding. The cardinals gathered from all corners of the globe, representing a variety of cultures, languages, and experiences. They were united by a common purpose: to choose a leader who could steer the Catholic Church through turbulent waters. The weight of history was heavy upon them. The future of the Church and the lives of millions of faithful around the world rested in their hands. The conclave was not an easy process. It was a balancing act of tradition and renewal. The cardinals had to navigate through complex political dynamics, all while keeping the best interests of the Church in mind. Speculations swirled, names were whispered, and yet one name began to surface more and more as the conclave went on: Luis Antonio Tagle. Tagle had been a favorite in many circles for years. His reputation for humility and his deep connection to the people had made him a compelling choice for many within the conclave. But it wasn't just his reputation that made him a strong candidate. It was his commitment to social justice, his intellectual rigor, and his ability to connect with people from all walks of life. As the cardinals continued their deliberations, Tagle's qualities became more and more apparent. His empathy and understanding of the world's complexities set him apart. His ability to speak to the hearts of the faithful, to reach out to those in need, and to offer comfort and hope made him a natural choice for the papacy. The cardinals began to see in him a leader who could bring a new perspective to the Church and lead it into the future. When the doors of the basilica finally opened and the announcement was made, the crowd erupted in joy. Pope Tagle, the first Asian pope in modern history, had been chosen. The news sent shockwaves around the world. Tears streamed down the faces of those in St. Peter's Square. The bells of St. Peter's rang out, echoing across Rome and beyond. It was a scene of unbridled joy and hope. Pope Tagle's election was not just a moment of celebration, it was a moment of renewal. The Church was entering a new era, one that was defined by humility, compassion, and a willingness to address the challenges of the 21st century. Pope Tagle's first appearance before the crowd was a powerful moment. His eyes twinkled with purpose as he raised his hand in blessing. The world had just witnessed the beginning of something extraordinary. Pope Tagle's journey to the papacy was far from ordinary. Born in the Philippines, he grew up in a world far removed from the luxury of the Vatican. His childhood was marked by a deep faith and a commitment to social justice. His parents, devout Catholics of modest means, instilled in him a sense of compassion and empathy for those who were less fortunate. These values would define his life's work and eventually lead him to the highest office in the Catholic Church. Tagle's path to the priesthood was defined by a thirst for knowledge and a deep empathy for the human condition. He excelled in his studies, earning a doctorate in theology from the Catholic University of America. But despite his intellectual accomplishments, his heart remained with the poor and marginalized.